weakness. Fear becomes the dominant way we approach things. Either we're avoiding or sometimes we attack, so we get to avoid uncomfortable feelings. Our brain's going to probably do one or the other. And when fear is a dominant motive for what we're doing, it is not life-giving. And fear tends to be associated with two very different responses, because we tend to, when we're afraid, want to cover up the parts of us that are weaker and more vulnerable, because we're trying to protect ourselves. We don't want people to see those because we're afraid they'll get used against us. Our congregation may not like weakness. They may look at weakness as a reason to get rid of us. People we minister to may expect us to just be strong and have, you know, the whole God thing going 24/7. And it's very, very, it's easy to try to conceal our weaknesses, especially when we're functioning in fear. We tend to do one of two things, which is fight, which is sort of a predator response, which means that we tend to eat people in our herd that make us upset. Or we tend to run away, which is sort of a possum response. It says, look, I'm going to try to duck and cover here. Do you remember the nuclear drills we did way back in school? Duck and cover, duck and cover. I'm dating myself, but I remember we'd get under the desks and cover our heads, or we'd sit out in the hallway, ducked and covered. That's kind of a possum approach to things. And the sad part is, for all of us, when we're not functioning in joy, our fear circuitry is going to cause us to do either predator or possum kinds of behavior that are not life-giving or joyful to us or to other people. Predator possum behavior gets to look pretty nasty, because just check out that tiger checking out the possum. Have you ever seen that look on somebody else's face when you're the possum? Or have you ever seen that look on your face in the mirror when you think about that person that's just annoying the heck out of you, that person on your board, or that person on your committee, or that person in your congregation that is just ticking you off? And the sad part is, when joy's low, we tend to do possum or predator behavior. In fact, a lot of us who've not had a joyful foundation for a long period of time, we tend to function pretty much in predator or possum behavior. We don't do a whole lot of joy. And the problem with that is our brain likes to amplify things. Think about your brain as sort of like an emotional relational loudspeaker, and it tends to amplify what's going on inside. Now, if you are rooted firmly in joyful connections with God and others, you are going to radiate and amplify joy, and you will naturally be creating a joyful place for others to be with you and belong with you. That's what we all do. But when our joy is absent, weak, or overwhelmed, guess what we tend to amplify? We amplify fear to people around us, or whatever negative emotion happens to go with fear. If we're afraid of being ashamed and somebody's threatening our shame, we may respond with a lot of anger and amplify anger. We also tend to amplify predator or possum kind of behaviors. They tend to get worse. And we end up in the middle of all that putting on masks so that we can hide that stuff, because we don't want to get eaten or attacked or made fun of or feel ashamed at the responses that other people have. We really just want to stay safe. The problem is that staying safe by wearing our masks doesn't bring joy to us, and we can't bring joy to anyone. We're busy hiding, and when we're hiding, our brain starts to crave a source of pseudo-joy to manage the distress, the fear, the anxiety, all that stuff that's going on inside of us. And you have probably all heard the joke about full gospel, because a lot of us in ministry, food is an excellent thing to give us a source of pseudo-joy, especially high fat, high sugar, all kinds of stuff like that. Now, the question gets to be, when we're low on joy and our brain is looking for something to help us get through the day, And you have to understand, this is not something you're consciously choosing, okay? These systems I'm talking about are so far below your level of consciousness, you cannot consciously manage them, address them, or change them through conscious thought. This hiding, the amplification, the craving for pseudo-joy, it is so far below our level of consciousness, most of the time we're not even aware that we're doing them. We have no idea. It all gets back to whether we're being motivated by joy or not joy. So our cravings get so unmanageable sometimes because mostly we don't know that we've got them. A lot of us try to do the God thing and say, well, I'm supposed to have self-control, so I shouldn't do this kind of thing. And that is probably a good thought, but that's not going to change the subconscious part of your brain and how all that wiring is put together, so you're going to still crave anyway. You'll just be more miserable and feel like more of a failure, which is not what we want. Now, pseudo-joy, we have BEEPS. And the thing about BEEPS, the behaviors, events, experiences, people, or substances, is that they can be for almost anything. BEEPS trigger the same neurochemical cocktail in your brain that genuine joyful relationships does. And they actually fool your brain in connecting to those things instead of the genuine joy that it really needs. So BEEPS could be sex, it could be partying or codependency, which we'll talk about. It could be drugs, it could be performance. Do you know, to your brain, performance and approval do the same sort of things as cocaine does? That's a scary thought for a lot of us. BEEPS could be alcohol, it could be work. You know, in ministry, a lot of times, workaholism is seen as a virtue and godliness. And the truth is, when it's a source of pseudo-joy, it is totally opposite from what we think it means. It could be internet or internet pornography. It could be approval, liking the pats on the back, the approval of other people for ministry we do. It could be about money, success, gambling, thrill-seeking, entertainment, control, or my very favorite, ice cream. Ice cream comes in so many different varieties and flavors. It's wondrous. Now, we're going to talk about some common ministry BEEPS. I mean, there's an infinite variety and combination of BEEPS that we could talk about, but some of the common ones in ministry, aside from the ones we normally think about, the alcohol and drug kind of BEEPS. Ones that are pretty common include performance and approval, codependency, food, and sex. So we're going to talk about each of these briefly, and then we'll do some questions. Performance and approval is a tough one. Now, if you can see that picture, you're watching some guy, that's the pastor. He's sitting there with his hands all clenched and all tight, wondering what they're going to do and just waiting for everybody to do, okay, thumbs up, it's good, they approve of me, they approve of me. This kind of pseudo-joy, basing a sense of I feel good about me, I feel good about life because of the responses I get from other people for how I perform, the kind of things I do in ministry, the sermons I preach, the kind of songs we do on Sunday, the offering plate, all the performance and the attaboys we get are totally the opposite of genuine joy, because genuine joy says, I'm glad to be with you simply because you exist. And the cool thing about God is he is always glad to be with us. One of my favorite lines in the new book is the lines that says, is God glad to be with us when we sin? And the answer is, well, is a doctor glad to be with you when you're having a heart attack? I'm like, yes, yes. I mean, God knows when we're stuck. He knows we need him, so he is there with us, wanting to give us his, hey, I am really glad to be with you regardless of what other people are thinking, or regardless of what they're saying, or regardless of what you're doing or not doing. Performance and approval is a basis for relating to God, and how we relate to people around us is deadly, because if we do our staff the same way, we end up creating human hoop-jumping machines. Predators say, I'm glad to be with you and feel good about me when you approve of me and the wonderful job I'm doing. And we can very easily eat the people for lunch that don't like us or don't give us the strokes or the acclaim or the approval that we think we deserve. We also carry this out towards other people and have them for lunch on our staff or in our congregations when they don't like what we're doing. Possums, on the other hand, say, you're really not glad to be with me unless I please you and perform well enough. And since I don't want to be eaten, I perform to gain your approval. That's sort of a hireling attitude that Jesus talks about in the scripture. It's like, I just want your approval. I want you to tell me I'm okay. You're really not glad to be with me, but I'll do good enough to get you to like me. Performance and approval, along with workaholism in ministry, is a tremendous issue. And as somebody who's done both of these, without joy, they literally will kill you in ministry and burn you out big time. The next one is codependency. Now, codependency, there are tremendous numbers of books written on it, and I don't even want to try to go through all those. I just want to let you know that the way I look at codependency is codependency is an attempt on my part to manipulate. I can't talk. Codependency is an attempt on my part to manipulate other people to get the kind of outcomes in ministry and relationships that make me feel good. Okay, that's what I mean by desired relational and ministry outcomes. I will do whatever behaviors I need to do so that I get the right outcomes. The predator and this is easy to do in ministry, because the predator version of this says, listen, I know what's best for you. Just listen and do what I say. Don't make me mad or we will throw you out. Okay, we'll throw you off the board. We'll throw you off the elder board, the deacon board. We'll throw you off the committee. We'll throw you off the church. And on top of that, I've been around churches that when they get irritated with someone, it goes public from the pulpit. And it's horrible. That is like, you talk about eating a person who Jesus loves. That's exactly what ends up happening with that sometimes, simply because they will not do what we say. And it's not so much, the reason we respond that way, it's not so much about a healthy sense of church discipline that Paul talks about in Scripture. It's more this codependent sense of, I feel good if you do what I say because then I'm in control, and don't tick me off. Just do what I say the way I say to do it and everything will be fine. The possum version of that we can do in ministry is, please don't reject me, disapprove, that should be of me, or leave me. I will do whatever you want me to do. That's a tough one, because at that point we're doing what I call de-selfing. We are not living from the heart or identity Jesus has given us, and we're probably not even aware at that point of what he wants us to do. We're simply functioning in ministry so that our boards, our elders, our deacons, other church staff, our home office, or whatever, we just don't want them to reject us or speak badly of us. So we will do whatever we need to do to please them. These are highly codependent behaviors, and they're pseudo-joy because the payoff is based on manipulating other people to satisfy our own need for joy. That doesn't sound very nice, and I'm sorry, it just doesn't sound nice, but that's what it is. That's what it's been for me. Sex. Sex is a difficult topic to talk about in churches and all kinds of settings, so I hope you won't be uncomfortable with this. But sex temporarily turns off pain in very low joy environments. That's why sex has such tremendous addictive potential as BEEPS, because the chemical cocktail that's released in our brain through sex sort of nukes the pain that comes from living in a low-joy lifestyle or the pain of a low-joy environment. This kind of thing can affect predators and possums equally. Okay? Predators and possums can both turn to sex, and it is especially easy now to turn to sex as BEEPS in the age of internet porn. When I was a kid, it used to be if you wanted to do something with porn, you kind of had to go to a store and be all embarrassed and order something, get something they kept behind the counter. Okay? That's not true anymore. And part of the reason internet porn is such a huge problem is because it can be done in private. I was talking to a supervisor at a counseling center probably 8 or 9 years ago who was at a conference of the, just a huge Christian conference. I won't tell you which conference it was. And the hotel staff reported, Billy Graham was at the conference, and the hotel staff reported to him that they had had the largest number of hits on porn sites during the conference than they have ever had with any other conference. So this is an increasingly huge problem. Low joy environments are tremendous breeding grounds for this. The other thing you have to realize is that in addition to pseudo-joy, which you can get through porn or all kinds of things, there is also an inappropriate joyful connection we make with people that we should not be having an intimate joyful relationship with. This is a major crash and burn factor for a lot of pastors. If we live in low joy environments and our brain is starving for what we need from God and from other people that we're not getting. And this is especially bad if you combine it with codependency or performance and approval and work issues. Because not only are we in low joy, but we're doing the kind of things that make us even more tired and make us crave even more. So all of a sudden we get a counselee or a parishioner or a church secretary or somebody in our life of usually the opposite sex, although this is not limited to members of the opposite sex, who is suddenly incredibly glad to be with us. And they smile at us and we smile back, and all of a sudden the joy centers in our brain are going, this is good, where has this been all my life? And that is so real and so powerful to the brain that if we are living in low joy or in low joy environments, we will tend to follow that joy into an exclusive relationship with that person where we've not really opened the relationship up to others outside. Where our joy center tends to go in those kind of relationships, our body tends to follow. And we don't have to go through all the major crash and burns that we've all heard about in the news or maybe even know about personally. Sex is a powerful form of pseudo-joy, and inappropriate connections with other people can lead to joy and inappropriate sex. And I lost my food slide. How could I lose my food slide? I'll just tell you that food is a huge, huge issue for a lot of us, for both predators and possums. One of the things that makes us especially tough, well, I'll tell you a story. I was working someplace years and years and years ago, and the leader of that organization decided that people who did altar ministry or ministry to people that came forward to the altar could not smoke cigarettes because he felt like it was just horrible for people to receive ministry from somebody that smelled like a cigarette, which I totally understood. What was ironic is basically everybody on staff there were probably 30 to 40 pounds overweight. So we came up with, okay, we can't smell like cigarettes, but nobody ever thought of the food beeps that basically most people on staff had. What's important about this food issue for us to think about is that we tend to attach to the people that feed us. In low joy environments, instead of attaching to the person who feeds us, we attach to the food. And since we always eat, it is easy to attach to food. As people who are leaders in ministry, we tend to set the pace for others, and we kind of sometimes formally or informally set the rules for, what kind of eating and or overeating is allowed and what kind of, sanctions or just shunning we do with people that don't handle food right. So food is a huge source of pseudo-joy, and because of the position that we have in the lives of the people we minister to, how we handle pseudo-joy or food that becomes pseudo-joy is not only important to us and our joy, it's important to the standards we set and what we say is okay and not okay for people around us. So that is a quick look at those four areas of pseudo-joy that can affect us commonly in ministry. Now, you probably have questions, and if you don't, Chris has questions to ask you.
Yes.
And I will turn this back over to Chris because he can go through the questions with you.
All right.
So, Chris, you should be back up, I think.
Okay. Hopefully everyone can see my screen here.
Yep.
Ed, you said so many things that are so profound and yet so relevant for us. You basically described so much of my life. And
Mine too.
I suspect many of us can relate to what you're saying here. And ultimately, what you're telling us today is that if our joy levels drop, we're vulnerable for some problems.
Totally vulnerable.
Right? And especially with some artificial joy, as you mentioned.
Yep. And the sad part is none of us want to be. You know,
Yes.
That's what's so difficult about this, because none of us get up in the morning and say, okay, I think I'm going to do pseudo-joy today.
Yeah.
We don't. That's the last thing we want.
Wow.
But
Wow.
in the absence of joy, it's exactly where we go.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, I suspect people want to engage some of what you said here, so I'm going to put out some questions for us to look at here. And what I think this is a very important question, Ed, based on what you shared, and that's for those of us in ministry. What kills our joy more than anything else? And so I want to invite you, listeners, to engage with Ed and I here. What kills your joy more than anything else when you think about your day, your week? What's your joy robbers? Let's talk about this a little bit. And Denny showed us how we can raise our hands, and even those of you with a webcam or a headset, we welcome you to join us here and sharing your thoughts. What's your joy robbers?
All right, so we've got 45 attendees, so I expect to see a lot of interaction here today.
Yes.
I'd like to raise your hand and I'll let you speak or type it in. Here we go. Claire, she's been here before. She knows how to type it in. She said for her is when love for others isn't apparent and does not seem to be present.
Wow. That's good.
Bill says when it's a secret. I guess joy is a secret. That kills it.
Wow.
And conflict and rejection from Sandra.
That'll do it. Yeah.
Shortage of time. When there's unmanageable stress. Controlling behavior. More stress. Fear and uncertainty. When others on the team act in a way... All right, hang on. A whole bunch of people typed. It went out of my window. When others on the team act in a way that increases the burden of responsibility on others.
Yep.
Wow.
When staff members talk bad behind my back. When the leaders are more project-centered than people-centered. My low expectations for joy. Being the sole source for solving problems for others. Seductive
Boy, that's heavy.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's
Yeah.
heavy.
That is.
Seductive or tempting people or situations.
Yeah, that'll do it. Yeah, that's hard. So there's a theme here I'm picking up that basically hardship, pain, struggles, temptations, hurts. I mean, these are all joy robbers. Ed, is that a pretty common list that you hear a lot when you're teaching this?
Yeah, those are, totally. Especially, it is so hard. We do a lot of mission work, and we're always working with teams of people that are about to go do ministry. And it seems like one of the things that kills joy in those teams is conflict or just some kind of relational problem between team members. team members. That just seems to be huge for almost everybody I've ever talked with. Those skills to stay connected and be glad to be together when there's conflict are so absent from a lot of ministries, and it just kills joy.
And as leaders, I suspect they feel a certain obligation or responsibility to be the one that has to fix a lot of the problems or direct, and there's a lot of pressure there.
There's huge pressure, and then people feel ashamed because they can't pull it off.
Yeah, right.
It's vicious.
Got a couple more. Just want to read those out. Someone said, my husband, a pastor, being too tired to be glad to be with me. Controlling or manipulative individuals. I like this one. Feeling trapped in a room or car with a predator.
Oh,
that's definitely a joy robber.
Ejector seats.
Yes, that's right.
And last one, when those you love do things that hurt them and you know they need your love, yet I need to be careful what I feed.
Yeah. Wow, those are all good answers. I mean, this really gives us an idea that that joy, real life events and experiences can rob our joy.
Oh, and I just saw Wade has his hand up. Wade, are you there?
Okay.
I went ahead and typed my question earlier.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
I got flooded with questions.
Thank you. All right. Well, Ed, we've got another good question here to ask people. And when do I notice that I'm feeling anxious or fearful? And Ed, I suspect that that's going to impact my joy levels when I'm feeling anxious or fearful.
Yep. I had a day like that yesterday. I had so many things happening at once. It's like I like being able to work on a project and really make some progress in it. And I can't remember how many things that I didn't plan on yesterday I had to handle. And I realized towards the end of the day I was anxious and I was feeling exhausted.
And that affected your joy levels, I bet.
Oh, it sure did. It sure did.
All right. Well,
Susan's already answered. She says,
let's explore this.
Susan said she notices it with sickness or when she's tired or overwhelmed.
Yes, sickness. Yeah.
Melinda says anxious when I'm overwhelmed with all that I have to do and I'm stuck in not doing anything.
Yeah.
Wade says when I'm about to meet with someone who I don't consider safe.
I would just throw out there, Ed, I notice this when I feel overwhelmed. When I have a lot to do and I lack the time or the resources, the anxiety really starts to kick in there.
Here's a couple more. Leonard says when I can't fulfill others' expectations. Ellen says when I feel incompetent to do what is mine to do. And Cynthia, when I'm not given enough time to accomplish a requested task.
Yes.
It's interesting to me that the responses to the first question was a whole bunch, but the second one there's not as many, because it is hard for us in ministry to say, look, I'm feeling anxious and fearful right now. Because we've kind of learned, well, you shouldn't ever be afraid, and you shouldn't be anxious for anything, and we should just be submitting by prayer and petition everything to God. It is hard for us to acknowledge anxious and fearful sometimes.
And I think you're really touching on something important, Ed, which leads us to our next question here. And what kind of mask do I wear when my joy is low or missing or overwhelmed? Because you're making a good point here. As leaders, it's frankly really hard for us to acknowledge some of these things.
Yep.
So we end up wearing masks out of pressure or out of fear, or some of us even feel like we have to. We don't have an option.
Yep.
So let's put that out there. I think this is another important one. What kind of mask do we wear when our joy levels are low, or when our joy is missing, or when we're overwhelmed? And as pastors and leaders, I suspect daily, hourly, you're experiencing overwhelm. So what kind of mask do we put on? What comes to mind? Ed told us a few of the masks in his presentation. I'm sure we can relate to some of those masks.
I have a happy, everything is okay mask. That's what Pamela just said.
Yes.
Cynthia says, appearing thoughtful. Susan, expressionless with an occasional pseudo-smile.
Uh-huh.
Ellen, cut to the chase, take action, suggesting action to others. Noel says, whichever one works best to be left alone.
Uh-huh. That's a good one.
That is a good one.
Barb, are you there? I'm going to unmute you. Barb?
I heard something,
I
but
heard our echo, I think.
oh, okay. Sorry, Barb.
I'm going to read from Wade. It depends on who I'm meeting with and what task I'm performing. A smile or in control mask.
So, Ed, we can wear several masks, is my guess. We can have a closet, so to speak, of various masks for various situations or people. Huh?
Completely. This is kind of like, if you've seen Madagascar, if you've ever seen the penguins, at one point they just look at the leader, looks at the others, says, just nod and smile, boys, nod and smile. It's like, and that's great if we're doing counseling or meeting with somebody, nod and smile. Yep. Yep.
That's good.
We in ministry, we perfect that one.
Yes. Yeah. So we can have a number of masks that we pull out depending on those situations and depending on how we're feeling.
Yep.
So
Sandra
Ed, what would
has
you
a...
say,
Oh, go ahead.
just as a quick note, is there a cost to wearing my mask? I mean, that's
huge.
implied here. Is there maybe a relational cost to wearing my mask?
Oh, yeah, big time, because when I wear a mask, I'm really not glad to be with anybody. I'm just trying to protect myself. And this is fascinating because the brain of people I'm interacting with know in 40 milliseconds if I'm genuinely glad to be with them or not, because my brain will amplify if I've got joy or not. So when I've got my mask on, I may nod and smile, but there's no joy going there. And joy is essential for the people we're ministering to so that they can receive healing, so that they can bond, and so that their identity can begin to change. The other cost of masks is this. We wear masks to conceal our weakness, which means we tend to not have a tender heart toward our own weakness or the weaknesses of other people.
Boy.
And boy, that is tough to think about.
Yeah. That's huge.
I got one I want to share with you guys, your take on this. She says, I share my heart and share that I'm sad or need alone time, or that I need to break to sort out the overwhelming feeling. I tend to be very quiet when contemplating difficult situations. Is that a mask or not?
Well, how would you respond to that, Ed? That's a good question.
I think knowing when you need to take a break is a hugely important skill that Chris teaches. So knowing when we and other people need to take a break, if that's really why we're taking the break, that's not so much a mask as it is you're practicing some good self-care and a very relational skill.
Good.
On the other hand, some of us who are more dismissive, we just say, well, I'm going to go think about it, or I need to go pray about it, with very little intention of ever visiting the thing. We're just like, I'm out of here, kind of, and I've done it in a nice way. So it kind of depends on how that one actually plays out all the way.
Good point. And if I'm making a lot of my decisions out of fear, that might be a sign my joy levels have dropped in those particular moments.
Yes.
So there might be a fine line between my self-care or... So just as a side note, friends, you could go see Ed and Maritza in Track 1 and learn some of these skills at Thrive that Ed's talking about. Or, as we're going to talk about later, Ed, you've developed Thriving, Recover Your Life, to actually train churches and communities on these skills.
Yep.
So this is important. So some of this I actually have to learn how to do.
Exactly.
I think that leads us perfectly to the next question that Leonard had. He says, is there a candid way of stopping and crying out to God to reverse our present condition?
I'm assuming that candid means in the middle of a meeting.
I don't know. To humble myself and invite others, he says.
You know, if you are in a situation where there's a conflict or a problem, one of the really interesting ways to handle that is to say, can we just all take about 5 minutes, just get quiet, and see if we can notice where Emmanuel might be. That's not confrontive. That is just kind of saying, I wonder if we can just disengage here for a minute, get quiet, let our nervous systems get a chance to rest, and see if we can't connect with Emmanuel to see what he might want us to know.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's you're giving us some good life jackets here today, Ed. That's really helpful. Yeah, I like that.
I have a couple more questions. Do we have time?
Yep, we have time.
David said, what do we do to increase true joy? Come to God like a baby?
What do we do? Well, Ed, you're a part of writing a book on this, weren't you?
So are you, Chris.
Yes. That's a great question.
That is a good question. Get the book. It'll tell you in 9 chapters. The problem with, let me say this, because from a biblical perspective, this always helps me think about joy. We all know about grace. Mostly what we've heard about grace is it's God's unmerited favor, and there's all kinds of little acronyms that people have attached to grace to help explain it. One of the things Jim has said, and I think it's said in the new book as well, is that if you were going to translate grace now into contemporary language, it would mean more like you're special. You're just special. You are a delight. You are a joy to God because he loves you, and you're his favorite. I mean, I'm his favorite too, but God can do that whole favorite kind of thing well. Joy is a response to someone who thinks that I'm special because they are glad to be with me. Because of what Jesus did on the cross, he's glad to be with us. So in terms of building joy, starting to connect with God's grace, who's glad to be with us, is one part of what we need to do to begin growing joy. The other thing is connecting with people who are also glad to be with us. Now, sometimes we have to look for that. One of the reasons we created the Thriving program is there are a whole lot of people who don't have anybody that's particularly glad to be with them. And learning this skill of connecting to other people in joy, they just don't have anybody to acquire the skill or practice with. So Thriving helps people in communities and churches learn to grow their joy together. If you have a bonded partner, you need to go see Chris at Thrive because Thrive is excellent training for how you and your spouse, your child, somebody that you already have a very close relationship with can grow, can acquire some new skills and get lots and lots of practice with them. Part of it is also, and one of the things we talk about in the book is entering the transformation zone. Transformation zone is a truly amazing place because in the transformation zone, we are aware of God's presence. We are aware of, we have a tender heart towards weakness, and the weak and the strong are interacting together. That is the optimum environment to begin growing joy, and that's part of what we're teaching you how to create in the book.
So I want to highlight this, Ed. I think this is key with what David was asking. So what you're saying is participating with other people and with God and in life and giving and receiving.
Yep.
Because David's question to me implied just going and receiving, which for us leaders, we're in giving mode, right? We give and we give and we give until our candle's burned out.
Yep.
And so I like what you're saying here. We're participating with one another and with God. And that's, in my mind, that's a beautiful picture, especially for those of us who feel like, you know, we're giving all the time, and we may even feel like we're burning out because of all that we're giving. We're not putting the fuel back in our gas tanks.
Yep. We use the expression, we got to keep our joy bucket full, because in any given day, in ministry or anything else, there's enough things that drain our joy bucket. So we've got to be able to continue receiving to be able to give. If we don't do that, we will burn out big time.
Well, this leads us to the really the next two questions I want to put out there for the sake of time, and I think it's very much related to what we're talking about, is when my joy is low, do I tend to function more as that predator that Ed talked about, or that possum? And predators are the ones that do the chomping and the biting. Possums they play dead and they run, or they feel defeated. And what are my favorite beeps? And Ed, I'm guessing here when those joy levels drop, the beeps will increase, as well as those possum and predator kinds of behaviors.
Yep. It's automatic. There's just a little switch in the brain that goes, okay, here we go. It's below consciousness. We don't choose it. We can't turn it off. It's automatic.
Well, friends, what's your thoughts to these two questions? Do you function? Can you relate more to that predator who maybe protects himself or herself by, by keeping people at a distance, or even responding harshly to weaknesses? Or do you relate to that possum where I'm best just kind of hidden behind the scenes so I don't get attention and I don't get noticed? As well, what are your favorite beeps? What are some of those common beeps?
We have one person brave enough to admit they're a predator.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then someone else said, don't say names. Yeah, I'm not going to say names here. Someone else said possum. In my group, we call them bears and turtles. Oh, here we go. One person says, publicly I'm a possum, but privately I'm a predator.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And Ed, I suspect that even by us being able to confess these things to each other or share these things, I suspect that can really put us on a good road for growing some joy.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely. Because if we're sharing this with somebody with a tender heart towards weakness, we're actually going to feel empowered instead of shamed.
Wow.
Right.
Because all of us do this.
That's huge.
And that was one person admitted, is that he's a little harsh towards weakness, so that's something he wants to work on. Someone asked the question, though, is the predator possum the same as fight or flight?
It's not exactly the same, but it's kind of the similar sort of thing. Fight-flight is more of a subconscious reaction. We can develop an identity rooted in eating other people to avoid pain, or an identity based in avoiding predators and not being seen. Both do it to hide weaknesses, but predators, possums almost becomes an identity.
Now this other person says, depends on the situation and the person. So can you be a predator in one place and a possum in another?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Someone about their beeps. She said, my go-to beeps is finding something crunchy to help me avoid biting anyone around me.
Yes.
Doesn't always work.
Wow.
I like that. Let's see here. Got a couple more people saying both, back and forth. And food and video games are their beeps.
Yeah.
Control through isolation is a beep. TV and performance. I bought ice cream on the way home last night.
We're taking that off the beeps list.
All right, here we go. Sweets. Somebody said they put on 30 pounds last year. So
yeah, it's easy to do, isn't it? It's easy to do.
This person's favorite beep is reading. Reading as an escape. I can see that. Switching to non-feeling modes. A question here. Does forgiving ourselves for our weakness help us to have grace for weakness in others?
Boy, that's a good question. My ability to forgive me is in direct proportion to how much I receive that from Emmanuel. So me trying to do the Ed, I forgive you is tough if I have not had a conversation with Emmanuel about that issue. So if in that context, yeah, forgiving myself can be important, but I just don't have it in me a lot of times. I just need to know that from God.
And does
Amen.
that then free you up, Ed?
Oh, yeah.
Does that free you up then to be able to move forward?
Yeah, because identity changes in response to joy. And when I'm with Jesus and he's talking to me about how he sees me and how he forgives me, that changes how I see me.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That identity change is critical in
good.
all of this.
All right, I have a question.
How about one more question, Denny, and then I should probably run through our remaining slides.
Okay, and I did send you guys some private questions. I don't know if you have time to look at those before we leave and at least answer that.
Okay.
But this question is kind of more general, and it's if some of this is subconscious, how do we really work it?
Good question, Ed. What would you say if some of this is subconscious for people? How can they really make some of those changes that we're talking about today?
Well, the really cool thing is you can be intentional about training with these new skills. If you are intentional about acquiring and practicing the skills, you will start to affect those deep levels of your brain that are below conscious control. So to me, the issue gets to be, okay, I can't change that, but what am I able to do? I am able to be intentional and discover the training I need, whether it's at Thrive or the Joy Starts Here book or in Thriving. I can find places to acquire and practice the skills that change those deep parts of my brain.
That's good. All right, let's move along. Just a couple quick. There's such good interaction here. Good stuff. I just want to quickly remind everybody that we're continually trying to get you more engaged. So we're looking at using the software. In fact, today, Ed and I, with Denny, we're testing this to see how it works with the webcam. And so we want to keep dialoguing and engage you all in some of these relevant topics that are just so important to our lives and our ministries and our families. I'm really looking for us pastors and leaders who want smaller, more personal groups for training and some interaction. Feel free to email me if you're interested in that. We're looking at creating some groups specifically. And the good news is Ed's coming back. Ed's going to be with us next week. Ed, you're going to talk to us about BEEPS and congregants and how to be a less overwhelmed pastor when we look at those needs. And I suspect Joy has something to do with all of that stuff.
I suspect it might.
So that's next week at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. And then the following week, we've got David Tackle back to talk about Christian formation in a nutshell. That's going to be a good one as well. And then Kitty Wilder, who is our Track 2 trainer at Thrive. Kitty's going to talk to us about returning to joy from negative emotions. So these are going to be some really powerful times. And Pastor Daryl Brazel is going to be back as well. Daryl and I are still working out a topic, but he's going to be with us again on May 9th. So Ed's mentioned the new book is here. The test version is available at joystartshere.com. Take a look. And you can interact with Ed and myself and Jim and Sheila and the authors on the various forums that are up there. Take a look at this website. It's a lot of fun. But take a look at this book. It's going to, Ed's got some really good information in this book, as well as talking about BEEPS. And so you'd hear more in the book of Joy Starts Here. And my friend Carol and I have been working on a Joy Starter blog. And you can take a look at that blog at joystarters.com. A lot more info there about joy as well. And Ed, people can learn more about you and Thriving at this point, thrivingrecovery.org, as well as the new Joy website, right?
Yep.
So Ed does his own Thriving Joy streams. I highly recommend you take a look at those, and we've got some archived ones that are just so good, Ed. I love what you're doing here. We need this.
It's fun. It's fun.
So friends can learn more about Thriving. We've got some Thrive opportunities coming up as well in May. The end of May, we're going to be in St. Albert, Alberta, Canada, doing a 5-day Thrive, as well as July. If you come in July, you'll jump in Track 1 with Ed and Maritza, and you start practicing a lot of the joy skills that we've talked about today. And then this fall, Ed, we're doing our applications training on Joy Starts Here.
I am
Very
excited.
Exciting. So we're going to talk about joy as it relates to starting joy in your family, in your church, and at schools. And so we're going to have the entire team together for that one. And there's just more information. I'm just scratching the surface here, as well as Dr. Wilder's Jesus in Mind topics. I think Jim has like 30 volumes of teaching. And
They're awesome.
Aren't these things great?
I have listened to every one of them. They are incredible.
And it's a great way for friends to introduce joy in the life model into their congregation with their staff. Just lots of good information. For the sake of time, Ed, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
This has been fun. We're going to have you back next week. I hope all of our listeners, our viewers, will invite your friends, your colleagues, your staff members. There's just more good stuff where this came from. And so thank you, Ed, for being here. Denny, thank you for what you do. You make these joy streams possible.
Oh, you're welcome.
So,
They're fun.
We just want to pray God's blessing on all of you, and we thank you for being here. We just pray that you will be joy starters in your families, in your communities, and your staff.
All
God
right.
bless you.
And for the person who just sent the question about accessing the recordings, they are available on your website, right?
Yes, at thrivetoday.org. Just go to the Pastor's Weekly, and you'll see all the archived joy streams at the bottom of that page.
And I have to apologize. In my weakness of this new stuff, I missed like the first 3 minutes of recording or for this particular one. So I apologize for that.
We forgive you.
We do.
We'll get back to joy.
Great.
We will not have you for lunch.
Yeah, right.
All right. Love y'all.
All right. Bless you.
Bye-bye. Bless you.